Hello and welcome to Meet the Mason, where we interview Masons as they share their experiences and life stories. Hello and welcome once again to Meet the Mason, and today I have a very special guest, past master, Patrick McConnell. So say hi, Brother Pat.
Hi, Brother Pat. Sorry, Brother Justin.
Oh, no, that's definitely perfect. Yeah. So Worshipful Pat was master in the lodge 2024, I believe.
2024, yes.
That's right. So for those of you who don't know, for our listeners who aren't aware, I am the chaplain of our lodge for going on my third year in a row, and I believe it's third year. And Worshipful Pat was the first one to appoint me to it. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Oh, it was a no-brainer. You have brought new life to the position and inspiration, and I'm grateful that you've been able to make it your own.
See, and that's the best part about all this, right? We all inspire each other. I think that's one of the best things about this fraternity. So here at Meet the Mason, we tend to ask a handful of questions, and we let the conversation evolve or devolve from there. Depends on how you look at it. So, Brother Pat, who were you before Freemasonry?
Before Freemasonry, father, husband, federal employee. That's about it. I think Freemasonry, before I was in Freemasonry, I think the values were there. Like I believe that service to humanity is the best work in life. I was a member of an organization, the Fredericksburg JCs, years ago, and that part of their creed stuck out for me. And ever since then, I've tried to live that. So I volunteered a lot, Habitat for Humanity, or homeless meals. That's actually how I got into Masonry, through the homeless meals, and we'll hopefully talk more about that later. But that's kind of what it was, more of a, tried to be outward focused, but more of an inward focus too. So that's probably more introverted, I should say.
I can see that, yeah, because I remember, that was one of the things that I always noticed about you, right, is that no matter rain or shine or what was going on, you were always trying to do something to help other people. In fact, I had an interview with Ethan. He was probably our second episode, and he called you out, man. He said, dude, watching Brother Pat go, especially with everything that was going on for the, what was that, the Lafayette right. Anniversary thing, so that whole dedication to public service, I think that's probably one of the things that a lot of people admire about Freemasonry, right? And it's not unique to us, right? You could join the Lions or the Kiwanis or the Rotary or something like that and do all the same things. But like you said, it's the internal and not the external stuff that, that really differentiates us from the rest of society, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
I really didn't focus on the internal, improving the internal aspect of myself until I was introduced and became aware of and learned more of the foundations of Masonry and the tenets that we believe in, and making ourselves better and hold each other accountable really in the end makes the community better in which we live. So I think that's, we're part of a bigger picture, and it's amazing to realize that.
That's right. It's crazy, right? The world will change if we do, right?
Right.
So
starts with us.
It does, right? They always say that stuff, right? Charity starts at home, love starts at home. I think a lot of people, they tend to miss that, right? They think, okay, I have to go out there and give, even though I'm running on fumes, right? I'm on empty. But, the opposite could be true, right? Your cup fills up and it spills over into everybody else's lives, and as long as it's good stuff that spills over, you're doing the right thing. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about you growing up, or, pretty much what led you here in the first place.
Okay. Native of the Fredericksburg area. I was born in Fredericksburg, but raised in Stafford. Always heard about Masonry on the periphery, but growing up, none of my family were Masons or was a Mason, and it got into it by guilt by association, I guess. And it really was not really an accident, but it just naturally blossomed from what I had been doing. Mentioned the volunteering to serve the homeless meals. And we did that through a group with Micah Ecumenical Ministries, but we did it here at the lodge down in the Baker Room. And my wife and I formed this basically a group of volunteers to do it. It was the fourth Tuesday of every month. We were here serving meals. And of course, using the Baker Room, 2 lodge members had to be here to make sure we weren't tearing the place down. So over the course of a couple of years, I talked to these Masons. One was Worshipful Chuck Cooper, and one was Worshipful Mike Moses, and just kept talking to them. And next thing you know, yeah, let's do this. Let's get more involved. Let's say yes. Write my name on the dotted line and make the obligations. But I called them my Masonic dads because they both instilled in me what Masonry was all about. And it just clicked. Like, yeah, this is what I'm about too. Why not? Why am I not involved before this? Was the basic question that I had. And so I went on from there, and it was interesting. Like I said, I've been born and raised here in Fredericksburg, and learning more about who was involved in the lodge. I'm thinking, I know those guys from when I was younger. Mm-hmm. It really is. When you get more involved in the lodge, you really realize that the lodge itself is so ingrained in the Fredericksburg area community that, wow, this is a place to be in terms of living the history that is Fredericksburg and being part of that history. And it really is cool because the lodge and Fredericksburg for the last 200 plus years have really gone hand in hand. It's really neat.
You're right about all that. You're right. Yeah, you'd be surprised by, who is a member here, who belongs here. And, it's funny how everything kind of intersects in so many different ways. So you start meeting people that you've never met before. You mentioned that, you didn't have any Masons in your family. I grew up, I didn't have any Masons in my family either. Apparently I have some that are all the way out in like Illinois or something like that. I'm entirely estranged from them. So, I guess, great minds think alike. I'll say that. But you talk about, being there with Chuck Cooper and Mike Moses. Those guys were some of my, very instrumental in my upbringing here in the lodge too. Mike Moses was actually my mentor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, when I got initiated in 2013, he was the guy that, took me under his wing, brought me through all the degrees, and, it was really great. And I knew that whole, old school Marine mentality was what I needed at the time. Cause I was like, man, I'm not saying I'm not disciplined, but, I need somebody to kind of, snap me into shape from time to time. And he did a really good job of that. So.
Good deal. Yeah, they both did for me too. And it's weird you mentioned growing up, childhood, only child in this area. And, so I was spoiled. Yeah, I was somewhat selfish. Mm-hmm. And I've grown up to step away from all that. And Masonry has helped a lot in adulthood too, that we are something bigger, part of something bigger. And it just makes sense to me to go with the flow with that naturally and help as many people as possible. And because it just makes, hate just doesn't comprehend, is not part of my vocabulary, and it doesn't connect with me. Everybody is a potential brother. Everybody is certainly a brother in whatever faith you belong to, and a sister, whatever faith. And it just, I don't know, it's just so ingrained in me. Like as we say in our charge when we leave a Mason meeting, that every human being has a claim upon our kind offices, and that rings with me too.
Yeah,
it really pulled me out of my selfish shell.
So I can relate to that, right? So I wasn't an only child, but I was about 7 before my younger brother was born, and so it was pretty interesting just to kind of, like, for the most part, I'm not saying that we lived entirely separate lives, but we kind of almost lived entirely separate lives. So, I ended up kind of growing up, doing my own thing, living my own way. I didn't have to, I don't know, compete with my brother for, what's going on at prom or what's, okay, well, I got to get my driver's license first because I'm the older one, so, that was all natural progression, right? There wasn't any fighting about that. So, to be able to kind of look past myself as well, that was something that took a long time, in my respect as well, So, no, I think that's great. So, what led you to Masonry, period, right? So, what got you here, right? Of all the other places, of all the other things?
I think it was the connection to values. That was the bait. And the hook was the camaraderie, I think, in the sense that we say we have each other's back, but in this organization, we darn well mean it. And that, I think, growing up an only child, when we have a sign somewhere out there that says enter his friends and leave his brothers, or enter his strangers and leave his friends. That's what happened here in terms of, I'm an only child that came in. Next year, I have 300 brothers, after I, went through all the steps and degrees. And that was the hook that got me. Just the camaraderie, the fellowship, the people who were there for me in terms of being able, it just wasn't Worshipful Chuck and Worshipful Mike. It was anybody that was willing to share their experiences and be a mentor and help me along. And even outside of Masonry, the brothers were still willing to help for whatever. And, that says something. And we really do live those values here. And it really is. That is the hook for me.
I can agree with that. Yeah. So I came in at 18, and when you're 18, you don't know anything in life, right? And so to be there, I mean, the amount of brothers who would pull me aside and say, "Hey, young man, let me drop a little wisdom on you, right? Or here's an idea that maybe you could look into. Maybe this is a way to guide you, to help you, right?" I saw that all the time. Somebody needs help moving. Okay, all right, well, let's get the gang together. Let's make it happen. Stuff like, one time, so we're talking about helping the homeless. So one time we were feeding the homeless, in the baker room, and we were doing it pancake breakfast style. And for whatever reason, I, instead of being out there away from the kitchen and stuff, I was in the kitchen and I was mixing up buttermilk pancake mix. And for those of you who don't know, I have food allergies to milk and eggs, right? So I cut open a new bag, right? And I pour it into this big bowl, and the dust goes airborne and it gets into my lungs. And it never occurs to me until like way later. And I go, man, why am I coughing? Why am I having a hard time breathing? Why do I feel this way? And then, I told the guys, I'm like, hey, I think I'm having allergic reactions to something. I'm going to go home, right? And as soon as I get to my car, I start coughing and I get lightheaded, even more lightheaded, even more lightheaded. So I'm like, oh, this is terrible, right? So I start calling the ambulance, right? I'm like, I don't want to play this game anymore. So anyway, the bottom line is that the ambulance eventually shows up, right? I see the gurney roll out. I run across. I plant on there. I'm like, all right, home free. I'm safe. Can't get me, And pretty much as soon as that happened, I collapsed, right? It was a pretty bad time. I think I woke up like 2 days later, right? Intubated and all that stuff. It was a pretty nasty time. And in fact, there's a picture out there somewhere where all the blood vessels in my sclera just popped, right? So I had like these blood red demon eyes for about 6 weeks or so, maybe 2 months. But the best part is that, the brothers that were there, right? Jeff Van Kuren, Mike Moses, a handful of others, right? They actually just kind of came in one by one and they're like, hey, we're here to see Justin, it's like, okay, who are you? I'm his brother. Right. And so everybody just kind of marched in a procession, got my parents involved and, luckily I survived. I woke up on Christmas Day. So, Christmas 2014. So for that year, my Christmas gift was life.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's real masonry. It happens outside these walls, whether it be helping each other out like that or sitting around breaking bread down at Sammy T's or hoisting an adult beverage at Jay Bryan's or, that's where masonry really happens. That really cements us, I think.
Yeah. Takes us outside. So, so speaking of all these really cool times and stories that we've got, you talked about your Masonic dads. Who are your Masonic heroes? We've all got a hall of heroes. Let's hear who yours are.
Well, I mentioned him already, but I do have to think Worshipful Chuck Cooper is probably my Masonic hero. And yeah, I'm a little biased, but he really is. I know him. We go to the same church too, so I know him outside of Masonry. And even there, he's just a real, what you see is what you get. He doesn't pretend to be anybody else. He's always willing to offer wisdom, not criticism. He's there to help. He's slowing down now as he gets more experience in life. But even then, his door's always open. He's willing to take you in. His wife, Bonnie, a heroine to some degree.
That's right.
I think she's probably a mother to a bunch of us. So, yeah, definitely Worshipful Chuck Cooper. And he's a Vietnam veteran. He is, like I said, we go to the same church. He's kind of everything I want to be when I grow up. I know that's cliche, but that's true. He really is something special.
And you're right, So, there were so many moments in time where I could remember looking back and seeing Brother Chuck going, wow, that's what I got. That's the standard. That's what I got to live up to. So when I learned the Entered Apprentice lecture back in 2014, he actually brought me in, and so I remember sitting on the back deck. At the time, he had I think it's called an Australian Shepherd. I always get that mixed up. I think her name was Sadie. I might be wrong.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Or was.
Yeah, I know. There's, dogs live, such relatively short lives. So you kind of, when somebody gets a new one, you go, which one was that one? But no, he would take me on the back deck and we would work through everything. And that was actually some of the best 6 weeks that I ever had, just sitting there spending time with Brother Chuck. He took me up to Occoquan one time. I forgot why he brought me up there, but he brought me up there, right? And to hear the stories about him from other brothers, you go, wow, okay, so he's always been this great, Yeah, Worshipful Chuck, he lives it. In fact, when I took over the chaplaincy after Brother Chris, sure, I thought, okay, how do I model the chaplaincy after Brother Chris? But also, way more, how do I model this after Brother Chuck? Because it's, when you look at that progression, right, it's like, okay, Worshipful Chuck, Worshipful Chris, Brother Justin. And I go, so, yeah, to be able to kind of sit there and go, all right, I'm going to figure this position out. I'm going to figure out what I'm supposed to do here. Those guys were, those two were very instrumental for me as well. So, oh, that's great. Yeah, Worshipful Chuck really is a Masonic hero if there ever was one. How has Masonry influenced and impacted your life?
That's a good question. It's hard. Well, I guess it is. Well, I don't say hard. It's somewhat difficult to gauge the improvement from when I joined Masonry in 2017 to now. But I think I've learned to be more of a listener. I think, in the sense that the brothers around me have listened to me, and they are examples for me to listen to them. But listen better at home, listen better at work, but just listen and learn and observe rather than preach and talk and that kind of thing. Patience has been a good thing to learn too. Big improvement. But I think we like to say we make good men better, and I think it has for me. It's instilled. It has made me more honest in terms of with myself, being able to admit my mistakes and take more accountability and responsibility for my mistakes. It has helped me be more humble, because there are so many great people like Worshipful Chuck roaming around these walls and these floors. Like, yeah, holy cow. I don't deserve to be here, especially, yeah, I was Worshipful Master, but I still go into that room where we have the pictures of all the past masters, and I'm thinking, I'm not worthy to be up there. Because they are just, there's something special too. So it just humility, listening, some of the more personal type skills that have really helped me a lot in masonry's helped me develop those much deeper, more intimately than I had before.
I like that, because so when I first started, I was in community college, right? And the more work that we did, the more I could basically listen to what the lecture was about, right? And this is in a college sense, right? So, I could sit there and I stopped taking notes, right, in school, right? So I would write a date down, or if it was math, obviously I'm showing my work and scribbling all over the page. But if it was a history class, if it was an English class, whatever it was, unless it was a term or a date or something like that, I could actually listen to it, internalize it, regurgitate it, and that really helped, and it helped in, my law enforcement career when people were, you have to do an interview here or there, right? And you go, okay, wait, hold on. You said this, and now you're saying this. So which one was it? And it's like, and not having to look down at a piece of paper that I wrote on, but, and even if, there are plenty of moments where people will just walk up to me and just in broad daylight right now on the street and start, spill their guts, right? For whatever reason, right? They just sit there and they go, hey man, last week, I crashed my car and whatever and blah, 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 right? And they just cry their eyes out for all of about 15 minutes, right? And, those skills, right? I'm not saying that I don't care, right? But I notice, that I can listen and, talk to them in the moment, right? As if I was a very active listener. And then as soon as they were gone, I'm like, okay, and cut that out. But, so those skills of, listening to people, being a more active listener, being a, having that, what do you want to call it? That honesty with yourself, I think a lot of people could really use that. And I think a lot of people are wandering around pretty damaged, in society, not realizing that, if they bothered to look at themselves for a split second, they go, oh, okay, this is what's wrong, fix it, and then, move on about their day. And suddenly they're doing so much better.
Absolutely. And thinking about the question more too, I think one thing that Masonry has taught me is how to be a better leader. I'd be the first to admit that I have failed leadership through the years, whether it be at work or other organizations I belong to. I worked my butt off to get to a certain level. And then when it came time to be the leader of that organization, or a better leader or a more official leader at work, I would self-destruct. And it was terrible. I probably lost a promotion because I just went down on myself. And it's really a self-esteem issue. But when I got to the point of the opportunity to be Worshipful Master was here, those old feelings of self-destruction started creeping in. But it took a while to finally realize that the people here don't want the lodge to fail. So hopefully they don't want to see me fail. And we are brothers. We're obligated to each other to support each other as much as we can. And I got to give it a try. And I did. And it really, I grew a lot that year. And both as a leader and as a person, and like I said, listening and being humble. But it was also an opportunity to say, hey, this is my vision. I got people to buy in that vision. And from what I've heard, and I could be wrong, that vision is kind of carried through in the officers behind me and the masters behind me. And they're adding to that. So they're making it theirs. But the last year in particular, I think has been more of a blend of of our philosophies of what the lodge could be and should be. Not to say I wasn't perfect. I know I've upset several people. One in particular, because when I was forming the line of officers for that year, I wavered back and forth. I want this guy, I want that guy. Okay, let's go with you. Oh, no, that's not, and at the last minute, I want to go with this guy instead. So I know I've upset a couple people, and then throughout the year, there's one controversy in particular that I know upset personally means a lot to me. But in the sense that position of worship master teaches you to when you make a decision, stand by it, particularly if you think you're doing the right thing. And that's how I feel about it. So we're moving on. The lodge is still standing. People still come. So, I just learned a lot. Leadership, humility, listening skills, people skills. That really helped a lot that year. And the lodge itself it still is so supportive.
That's right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I kind of agree with you, right? So, and personally, I think that this was something that grew from pretty much from the seeds of COVID, right? Or I should say the ashes of COVID, right? So we had all that happen. A lot of people left, some people stayed behind, right? And we really tried to build back in a way that was going to make everybody grow, right? Make the lodge grow. We set up, new cornerstones, that were outstanding. So what Chris Tripp laid down, what Joe laid down, what you laid down, right? It really did blossom in your year. It was a beautiful year. And then now it's starting to really blossom even more, right? So finally that bud finally popped, and I feel like that was your year, was when that bud that was just growing, it was still green, and then it finally popped open and it said, here I am, so I think it's a beautiful thing to see just how much, and you're right, it's a continuation, isn't it? Right? So, you laid down, on top of what they laid down, and Mike laid down on top of yours, and now Seth is laying down on top of his. It's this, now we're creating these new layers of everything just getting better and better. And, and you talk about that, what's that? Imposter syndrome, right?
Right.
Right. And to be honest with you, I have a lot of that too, right?
I still do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it really is cool. Like I've said this many times before in the past, that any success that I can claim through my year is based on the officers that I had with me. They really stepped up to the plate. We had a great year. I did some things, but the officers really stepped up, particularly Michael Dove and Seth Roderick. And one person in particular, you mentioned the Lafayette visit celebration, the 200th visit of his celebration to the lodge, Ethan Burgess. I'll brag a little bit. I saw a little bit in him that I thought, he would make a good leader here in this project. And sure enough, he took it, ran with it, and it went off in a fantastic manner. I mean, he was a superstar. And watching him and Seth and Mike and John Lapke and all the people behind them, you grow into their roles and grow and progress beyond those roles is really fulfilling. That means more to me than actually have been master here, because the seeing people grow around me, because that's kind of think a leader's job is to make the people around him better. And I think I've accomplished that. From what I see, I can say that. And it just really is touching. Yeah,
you brought us to a new level of prosperity.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
And I kind of recognize that myself. There's nothing more, I guess, awe-inspiring than to see somebody really get into their groove with something,
right.
And do whatever it is that they do. If it's mopping floors, who cares? But if they do it really well and you can tell that they're in their element, it's always amazing to watch. Mm-hmm. So, I saw you in that element. You might have been a duck in the water. You might seem like you were graceful on the surface and paddling like crazy underneath, but you really did a great job from start to finish. There wasn't a moment where I sat there and I went, what? I never once questioned how well you were doing, because I was like, see, this is what's really great.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm my own worst critic, and I look back at that year and I think, man, I really got lucky with whom I had with me to serve as master. And that team we still have, is amazing. And like you said, to watch them blossom is so rewarding that,
That's right.
Maybe I did okay after all.
Of course you did. Of course you did. Well, it reminds me of, there's this line that I remember hearing somewhere, probably deep in the annals of Masonry. I mean, like, who knows where I got this? But I remember it, and I ended up kind of using that as a litmus from there on. Everything that we do, everything that we have done, prepared us for what we're doing now. And everything that we're doing now is preparing us for something to come.
Good point.
So, to see, that, you might have gotten right up to the brink so many times of getting into leadership positions or something like that, and then falling away, all that was preparing for you to break through that and become the leader that, we all knew that you could be. And now that you've done it, right, that's in preparation for the next big, awesome leadership project that you're probably going to do now, or sometime later on down the road in the future, right? And so everything builds on itself. There's always this progression, right? So, where we've been, led us to where we are now. And where we are now is what's going to lead us to what's going to happen in the future.
All right. Good perspective.
Yep. So here you are, man. That's worth celebrating.
Appreciate that, sir.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do you live those teachings today? In your daily life, a personal philosophy you might, hold on to or carry throughout the day.
Listen more than speak. Try to talk to myself better. My inner language about myself, to myself, is sometimes not very positive. Like I said, I'm my own worst critic. And so I don't really... I guess the golden rule is to treat others as you'd like to be treated. And for me, it's almost the reverse. I need to treat myself like I want to treat others. So it's just, we mentioned internal already several times, and just the emphasis that Masonry has on internal improvement is something that I work on daily. Hopefully something's coming through. Reaching out to people, being more of an extrovert, telling people that, hey, you're okay, and I'm here to help you, or got your back, or, I'm with the government, I'm here to help you. I'm formally with the government, but I'm still here to help. So it's one of those things that, to me, it's easy to put our tenets into operation on daily life, and just the way that things have evolved over the years. That it's what I live now. Not that doesn't mean I still don't shy away from certain things, but I try not to now.
It's funny that you mention the that self-talk thing, right? Because I struggle with that myself, right? Oh man, I'm always so down on myself, and over time, at some point you got to stop and realize, okay, what everybody's saying, this is their consensus, so why does it not reflect how I feel on the inside, right? I remember one day I was feeling pretty down, and my girlfriend Cheryl called me, and we're sitting there talking. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm just a loser, or whatever I said. She's like, what are you talking about, man? Like, have you seen yourself? Have you seen yourself in action? Do you see yourself in the mirror from time to time? You don't see the cool handlebar mustache and the, and all that stuff. You got some swag, dude, and it took some time, but, it reminds me of, oh gosh. So there was this old lady that I used to help out, right? And I pretty much graduated high school, and I said, okay, now I have 24 hours a day and 7 days a week to do it. So I have all that freedom. So what am I going to do with it? So I started volunteering for the blind. And as it turns out, she was a life coach, and she had a whole bunch of family that were Masons. So she gave me a ring basically when she found out, over time, people start to figure out, you start to get to know somebody. Oh, okay, so you're in Masonry. So this ring was handed down from like her uncle, who was stationed in Tinian as part of the Manhattan Project, and then her uncle, or his uncle before, I don't know. Basically, it was like her great uncle. And so that ring was over 100 years old by the time it got to me. And so I'll occasionally still wear it now. I usually wear it as a pinky ring because my fingers have gotten so fat. But, one thing that she said was, when it comes to parents, watch how you speak to your kids because that becomes their inner voice, And so now these days, well, it's a little late now, right? I think for the both of us, but, not for the opportunity to help to change that, So to kind of get people to stop and think, is that really how that is? Look at all these people. Look around you, man. Look at all these people that love you, Look at all these wonderful things that they say about you, Don't downplay them, right? Be humble, but don't downplay them, because this is what you've turned into in spite of how you felt when you were, might have been younger. So it's always interesting to hear those kinds of stories because, man, I struggle with that myself. So tell us, what has Masonry given you that you couldn't seem to find anywhere else? What makes us unique compared to all these other organizations or anything else that you've done?
I think the unique part of it is the attitude or the welcoming attitude that brothers outside of the area have. Had the opportunity to take, we have the George Washington Obligation Bible, had the opportunity to go to Gabon in Western Africa to take the Bible there. And the brothers, it was like being home. They treated us like brothers and welcomed us and took care of us. And it was a great 3 or 4 days that we were there. And the occasion was the president of the country was also their Grand Master, and he was being reinstalled in one of the Bibles there. And they had fostered a relationship with one of our past masters, Worshipful Decker, Chris Decker. And he was like, yeah, let's do this. This is something that, will be valuable experience. And it sure was. It was still keeping contact with a lot of those brothers. And that's kind of the extreme example. But again, it was just that connection of brotherhood. Wow. And it's like that anywhere. I've been to several states now and the same thing. So countries and states, no matter where you go, the brotherhood is a brotherhood. And everybody lives it.
You're right about that. So I remember in 2013, there was a whole, what's that called? What do you call it? An entourage? It was like a whole entourage from Gabon. They came, and I think they called it the twinning ceremony or something like that. But essentially, Chris Wilson was sitting as master that year, and it was a public ceremony. So they all got together and basically had this whole ceremony thing, and now we're sister lodges with, I think it's like George Washington number something in Gabon.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And forgive me for not remembering all the details about that lodge, but I thought that was a really interesting time. And I know that there was a photo that I took back in the day that might be lost. That might be like digitally lost archive photo, but I do remember I took a picture shaking hands with one of those brothers, and it was actually a really cool time.
Yeah. I was a little skeptical about going because, one, we're taking a 300-year-old Bible across the Atlantic. But on one hand, they did make a donation to help restore the Bible. But on the other hand, the really most rewarding part of that trip was we showed the Bible to the country's president, the Grand Master, and he smiled. Like, damn.
Yeah.
Wow, that was amazing. And he was truly grateful that we brought that to him, that he was able to touch it, to see it, to have his own experience with it. And he smiled like, wow, that is truly impressive. It really, really touched me in a most impressive way that, one that emphasizes the Bible is all Masons, not just ours at the lodge. But again, that we know we've been over backwards to help a brother, and it was able to see that smile really pulled it all together for me. That trip was more than worth it just because of that smile.
Just because of that?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah. Well, speaking of all that international stuff, I think, was it in your year that Brother Troy got his Master Mason's degree?
I believe so.
I think so, right? Because
Joe's, I can't remember.
I don't remember either, but I remember that you were either sitting as senior warden or worshipful master at the time, and we had those brothers from Brazil come down.
Oh, right.
Oh, right. Man, we had a blast. That was some of the best times that we've ever had, and it was funny because the entire time, because they're Brazilian, they obviously speak Portuguese, and none of us spoke Portuguese. So I did my best speaking Spanish to them, and it worked, right? It wasn't necessarily the best, 1-to-1 ratio, but it certainly worked. And the more that we talked, the more we started drinking it over at Jay Bryan's, and then pretty much, at some point, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Kyle Buchwald, Brother Kyle Buchwald. He takes off his B-52 bomber lapel pin, and he pins it on somebody, and then suddenly Worshipful Jamie's jumping in. He's like, "Hey, this was my pin for the year." And then next thing you know, everybody's exchanging everything, and suddenly nobody's walking out with the lapel pins that they walked in with, right? And that was a really great time. I remember. So there's this bracelet that I got that my ex gave me. And it really meant something to me, especially in terms of the Royal Arch or something like that. It was really meant to be a build the temple wherever you go type thing for me. And I gave him the bracelet. To be honest with you, I got in a lot of trouble for that one because I thought that it was like some cheap plastic beads. Those things were not cheap plastic beads. Those things were actually pretty expensive stones. I didn't realize that. But I gave that to him, and he gave me this massive medal from the Royal Arch over there, and he pinned that on me, and so I actually wear that on my Royal Arch jacket every time I go, and this thing it's huge, and it dangles. It's crazy. But yeah, later on that night, what is it? We went down to the cigar shop. We got some cigars that had Brazilian tobacco leaf in it. We went back to Brother Kyle's house. He gave one of the kids a guitar, oh yeah. So it was this whole experience, and we had a blast while we were out there. And he actually took all of that time, the photos, all the memories back home, and he did a presentation on it.
Oh, wow.
So he actually took all of his experiences with us and, shared that with his lodge. So It was a really beautiful time.
Wow. Yep. I do remember them. And we also had the Romanians that year.
We did.
Yep.
Yep.
And then because of the Lafayette event, we had a couple people from France. So this lodge is special. We have a lot of people come and we have an outward focus. And not only because it's George Washington's lodge, but we have that outward focus that, all brothers are welcome here. The door's always open. So that goes globally.
It's touching.
It's really neat.
Yeah. That's very touching. So we've talked a lot about a bunch of cool stuff that you've done, but of all of them, or perhaps even ones that we might not have mentioned yet, what have you accomplished so far that you are most proud of in your Masonic journey so far?
I think I've alluded to it. I think having a line of officers that I could confidently leave the lodge in their hands, and that so far has proven to be right. They put a lot of trust in me, and I put a lot of trust in them, and that trust is paying off for all of us, I think. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I feel most proud of, for lack of a better word, that, the lodge is in good hands. Got lucky.
There you go. Yeah. It definitely feels like a hot potato scenario, where it's like, here's this really impressive crown jewel. All right, I'm going to hold it for a little bit, and boom, right? You pass it off to somebody else.
Yeah, only a year. It feels like, you have this huge, you plan for your years before your year, and you have you have a, very Worshipful Shelby tells us to put together a binder, years before that lays out what you want to do. And, I have mine like 6 inches thick, and I have all these ideas, plans, all this. And then the year comes like, oh, don't have time for that. Don't have money for that. Can't do that. Don't have people for that. And they're throwing this out. So you get through the year and I'm thinking, wow, we did a lot, but I wanted to do so much more. I need more time. But you just got to realize there's a season for everything. And your season's that 1 year. And the best thing you can do is leave the lodge in good hands. And I think, like I said, I got lucky and had a great group of officers whom I admire a lot and still admire. They really have picked up the baton and run with it. And the lodge is more bountiful because of that. It really is. It takes a team to really do it well. And so I think I plugged in what was most important to me. But again, the greatest accomplishment, I think, is leaving the lodge in good hands.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, I'm chaplain, right? So it reminds me of a biblical thing, right? David did so much to create that peace, right? So that Solomon could actually rule and make it blossom. Mm-hmm. And I think for everybody who sits in that chair, they are both David in some respect and Solomon in others, right? They're laying down some groundwork that needs to be laid down, and it's unfortunate because, they don't get to build that temple, right? And yet here they are flourishing while building this temple and making something so much bigger and better, right? And more beautiful that perhaps the guy before him couldn't, but he at least laid some groundwork for it, right? So I kind of think of it that way. It might not have meant to have been done in your year, but to see how things have progressed over the years, it's not like they're going to scrap all these ideas overnight.
Right.
It's that, okay, that's definitely, you got the ball rolling. It might be a slow roll, but it is rolling, and then suddenly it's going to definitely snowball into something bigger and better, so
right.
yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's how I'm seeing, what you're saying is, there was so much that you wanted to do, and yet you accomplished so much that the previous guy couldn't, and
good point,
and Mike accomplished so many things that I guarantee that you wish that you could, during your time. Right. And I'm sure that Seth is going to do the same thing that, Mike felt too. Right. So everything is snowballing into these, beautiful directions, but you at least laid that cornerstone, you at least set the first stone down, and, it takes about a year for a foundation to settle. So, so I think you're doing great.
Thank you. And I do have to admit, the past masters, Worshipful Joe Gilgerson, Worshipful Chris Tripp, and several others, really, they built their own cornerstones, and I was lucky to be able to place mine with them, and honored and humbled to be able to do so, because those are some great names in our Mason history that in this lodge that are still well revered and looked up to. So right. Yeah, you're right. It's a progression, and each Mason, each Worshipful master puts his stamp on it, his own cornerstone, and builds them on that. So yeah, to see that progression from even past masters, from several years ago is amazing. Yeah,
that's right. Thus there's a succession of ages. Yeah, so
that's one of the hard things too, because you get, for that year is so intense. You're constantly busy. You're constantly here. You're constantly, if you're not here, you're answering phone calls and emails or going to other meetings elsewhere, other lodges. And it is so intense. And it's really strange because it's hard to let go in the sense that, elections are usually the second just second Friday of December, and then the next day's installation for the new master. And I'm answering emails and calls and everything right up until election. And then the next day when the new master was installed, like everything went quiet. No more emails, no more phone calls. Like something's wrong here. I should be doing something. It's hard to let go when you're involved so intensely for that 1 year. And that really, I was depressed for a while. Like, man, what am I going to do now?
Right.
And some people some masters even are still have worked it so intensely in their year that it's rarely that they come around anymore. And part of it, is we do get worn out. But on the other hand, it's so rewarding. It's hard to let it go. But again, watching the other offers and how they grow and how they put their mark on it, that's impressive. It makes it easier to let go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned that, and that's actually a question worth asking. So what about it makes it so hard to let go?
Well, one of the reasons that I failed leadership-wise over the years, and this was probably the introvert in me that blossomed to my detriment. People would come, ask questions, look to me for guidance, look to me for advice. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do here? How come we did this? Blah, blah, blah. All these questions. I hated that. Just leave me alone. I want to do my own thing. But it took a long time to get over that attitude. And being master, it's worse. It's more, not really worse. It's more intense that people are coming to you. What do we do here? What do you think of this? How about this idea? Can we do that? Can we do this? Not just from the members of the lodge, but members from other lodges, from the Grand Lodge, when the Grand Master comes and sends you an email. Hey, I have this. And like, uh-oh, what do I do now? But it's a good thing. He wants something different, especially when he visits. He wants something specific. Just that you're kind of the center of the Masonic universe as defined by the lodge. And getting out of that center is a relief, but also kind of a letdown that, I'm done now. Now what do I do? It's like 7 years of college and finally graduating, but now I gotta get a real job now or something like that. That's kind of the analogy that I use. Yeah, I told my wife, I've done 7 years. I've been master, now graduated. Now what? And in masonry. And I want to stay involved with Lodge 4. I've kind of gotten involved with other Blue Lodges, but local lodges. But, it's still, Lodge 4 will always be my cornerstone inside. Yeah. That's where I grew up.
I love that.
Yeah, it's an experience. And I think being a worshipful master is a great opportunity. You answer a lot of questions about yourself. You prove a lot of things about yourself that maybe you were doubtful about. One of my big regrets is not serving in the military. Part of me says, well, maybe I wasn't cut out for it or blah, blah, blah. And I think people will tell you it's not for everybody. Being worshipful master is not for every brother on that same line. But I was able to be elected, have the trust of my brothers to run the lodge or be the guiding light for a year. And I'm glad I did it. No regrets there. Some things I didn't do. There's one couple of things that wish I'd done a little better or differently. But other than that, no regrets.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you mentioned, regretting not being in the military. I had that for a while. And then once I got into law enforcement and then hearing the stories, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm good. I hate this already as it is. Like I don't think I want to continue with that, so
It's kind of like me the same way that, the more stories I hear, well, maybe I didn't want to do that.
Exactly.
I thought, in my mind, to make up for it, I volunteered as an unpaid volunteer in the Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Oh, wow.
And the auxiliary was actually kind of cool. We take the same oath that active duty service members take, wear the same uniform, and except for their law enforcement and military duties, every other duty in the Coast Guard was open to auxiliaries. If you wanted to volunteer for it, take the time to train it, be dedicated to it, they'd let you do it. And that was really cool. I did that for 10 years. And kind of the same thing, though. Got to a certain point and self-destructed at a certain point in the leadership role. But it was really neat. I talking to admirals and the chiefs of stations and those kinds of things, and working with them side by side. It was really cool. But I have to admit, now it's cool as being a Mason.
Yeah, no, you're right about that.
Yeah, it was. So that's kind of, I put a Band-Aid on that regret of not serving in the military through my auxiliary service, but I still regret not serving. But you're right, though. You just learn things that, maybe it was the best thing. And I think, if I had served, I wouldn't have met my wife or have my kids, or probably wouldn't have even been a Mason if things had gone differently down that route. So things happen for a reason or don't happen for a reason. So
no, you're right. They did, I agree with you on that one, and that's another interesting thing about all these podcast episodes, right? You start learning stuff about brothers that you never knew, right? I never knew that you did all that, It's actually really cool. So, yeah. And you're right. The same thing goes for, not everybody's cut out to be master of the lodge, I know I think I'm going on 12 years now, a Mason, and maybe in the very beginning, I thought it would be a good idea to become the master of the lodge. And every time that opportunity has come up where it's like, hey, dude, you could jump in the line, I'm like, no, right? Because I know that, peeking behind the curtain would probably be enough for me to, I don't know, what do you want to call it? To sour the taste,
Right.
So, I kind of sit there behind all of that and I go, I'll tell you what, man, as chaplain, I'm called upon to love everybody. And that's a whole lot better than, having to make big decisions or, deal with these private peaks and quarrels and, all these little things like that tend to pop up. So I'm with you on that. Not everybody's cut out for everything.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah. And speaking of all this stuff, so we've talked about all your accomplishments so far, but what about yet? What do you want to accomplish yet?
What do I want to accomplish yet? In Masonry, I assume?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure yet, to be honest. Just to be useful still and in some way to help other Masons grow still. Not sure how to do that yet. I'm still, even after a year, I'm still trying to find my way within Masonry now. Do I want to be master again? Probably not. But there's other roles. Hopefully I can do within a lodge or within Masonry itself, looking out beyond the lodge. But I'm not sure yet, to be honest. I'm still trying to figure that out.
I think that's one of the best things about past masters, right? Is that they have this different level of not only knowledge, but freedom to sit there and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. And they jump in without any hesitation. They're not afraid of anything, they commit to it head first, and they just know that it's going to work out. Well, who knows whether or not they just know, right? But that level of trust in themselves, that faith in themselves, the ability to operate on behalf of the lodge and, advise the current master that year, everything that they do, no matter what it is, they're really helping to kind of pave the way even better, even more than they did in their year, right? So it's like you're giving back even more than you did before. It's just, it might be a little bit more behind the scenes, but I can definitely see it. We see the fruits of all of it,
right? Good point. And you mentioned behind the scenes, and that's kind of where I like to be. Having been master, I don't need the attention anymore. So I'd rather be the silent partner in terms of, like I said, helping other Masons grow, learn more about the craft, more help them through life in general, really. Because I've definitely have all kinds of brothers that have helped me in life. So, yeah, like I said, just be useful in some way. I don't want to be, the grumbling old past master sitting in the north side of the lodge. It wasn't my year. We did this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, I see something good. I'm going to help him get that done. Those kind of things.
I like that. Yeah. So, no, that's actually really interesting. So tell me, this is one of my favorite questions, right? And I just recently added it, but I think that it's a question that's worth asking, and I think I know the answer to it, and I'd love to hear the story behind it. But what is your favorite working tool and why?
My favorite working tool. I think I actually had a brief presentation on this sometime last year because I kept asking all the other officers to write something about their favorite working tools. Mine is the plumb. And part of it is because my dad was a land surveyor and I helped him during the summers throughout some of the years. And the plumb was kind of one of the major instruments to make sure that, the plumb line, make sure our instruments were plumb and perfectly perpendicular to a certain point. And that's kind of maybe, the plumb. Really, at least in surveying, of course, you can say all you want about the level and some other things in surveying, but the plumb, I think, was a tool I used every day in surveying, every day, multiple times a day. And it as you know, it admonishes us to walk uprightly before God and man. And yeah, and it's something that it just emotional attachment, I think,
Wow.
with my dad. I don't know if I may still have it somewhere, but my dad brought me a plumb to help, when I joined the surveying team when I was a teenager. And somewhere, it's around somewhere, but, that was pretty cool.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Because, so one of the reasons why I asked is specifically because I was like, oh man, this is going to be so cool asking Brother Pat, was because the plumb is also my favorite instrument.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, sure, all those other ones are great. Yeah. But yeah, and it's funny because, when I was first going through, I think I was just so young and so literal that I thought it meant to sit up straight, right? So I was like, okay, all right, plumb, it was the goofiest thing. But the more I kind of thought about it and meditated on it, the more I realized that, not only is it all about standing tall and, doing the right thing and, being that kind of guy, but it's also about, that journey inward, right?
Right.
People think so often to think straight up, but, not so much straight down,
Right.
And, sometimes you just got to dig as deep as you can into the depths of some of those nasty parts of yourself and chip away at that before you can really bring up all the beautiful treasures to the surface, So that's definitely one of the reasons why I think about the plumb all the time, right? I'm like, man, that's an awesome, that is probably one of the most profound working tools, and we read in the book of Amos, right? Going back to the chaplain roots, right? In the book of Amos, it talks about, so basically, for context, right? So the book of Amos happened after Solomon had died, right? So you have one of his sons, Jeroboam, and then there was some contention between, okay, who's the rightful heir to the throne? And so there was this whole mess. But people really turned away from, what was good in Solomon's time and started turning to some pretty bad stuff. And basically God took Amos out to the middle of the desert and said, look at all these horrible things, see all these horrible images. This is what's going to happen to the people, your people, if you don't turn away from all this stuff and you actually fix yourselves, and of all those, there's that one line, the Lord stood upon a wall with a plumb line in his hand, right? And saying, basically, ultimately saying like, this is the standard, right? This is the way that it needs to be. This is this is what I want, make it happen. right? And you're not going to get another pass, just because, you're, such a special and near and dear person to me. You either fix this now or, there's going to be an unfortunate consequence. And so, I remember going through that, and thinking about all that stuff when I was younger. And I said, well, I'm not a teenager anymore. Right. So all the dumb stuff that I did as a teenager, well, that has to go away. Right. And now I have to adopt a completely new life and start living it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And, it took some time. Right. I think of course, you always got to get the stupid out when you're young. Right. But, once I did, I really started really meditating and thinking more about the plumb line, going, okay, maybe I did something this way. Gosh, now that I've matured a little bit more, now I feel pretty bad about, how I treated this one person or how I handled this one situation. What am I going to do now? Right. I can't go back and fix it. What am I going to do now to fix that now and be that much more along the lines of that standard?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think for me, the level has, we place the connotation of equality on that. And to me, the plum's more internal. To walk uprightly, to, we always, if we want the truth, we always say, tell me straight up, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the plum does that. You can't make a plum lie.
No.
It's going to go straight down no matter what. And so I think that's internal. Of course, we do have the square virtue to live by that. But even that, I think, is has more of an external influence than the plum does. So, because I think that, again, I think the plum's more internal focus for us.
I agree with
you.
For
me, for sure.
Yeah.
But, like I said, it has that emotional connotation to it that, surveyors depends
mm-hmm.
probably almost as much on the plum as it does anything else. So it's pretty neat. And, masonry and, the plum's important to that. So there's a connection there that is practical rather than esoteric or, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
It sounds simple, but maybe goofy.
I don't think so at all. I think that's some really awesome stuff,
yeah.
Because, it really, you're right. The level is how we treat other people. The plumb is how we treat ourselves, and, and so many people think way too high, they look up too much, they don't look down enough, and some people take too much time looking down and forget to look up.
Right. Yep. Good point.
Very
good point.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty about putting the square in the midst of all that, the idea that, that's the intersection of, here's how I feel about myself and here's how I feel about other people. So what does that say about me?
Right.
Anyway, man, I'm getting on a philosophical tangent.
Well, we can be for hours on that one.
That's right. Yeah. Well, so it seems like we've had a really good time spending time together, and I really don't want it to end.
I don't either.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't get around to, this is one of the best things about the podcast is that we actually get the chance to, sit down with each other and talk, and it's not business related. It's not, I don't know, right? The sole purpose of all this is to pretty much, sit around and talk amongst ourselves,
This is masonry too. We probably learned more about each other in this last couple hours than we did in the lodge in the last several years.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
thank you for the opportunity. This is awesome.
Absolutely. And with that, so what advice would you give somebody who's just now considering joining masonry or who's getting started now?
Advice. We always joked, and we still do, because it's so hard to say it. We always joke that the secret word of a master mason is no. But I'm going to take that and say, ignore that. I think the only real way to learn masonry and to learn more about your brothers and just get something out of it is to say yes. Now, granted, you have to be measured in that because you can masonry can be more than a full-time job if you let it be. But I think the only way to really get something out of masonry is to say yes and be there as much as you can.
Wow. That is a wonderful yet controversial answer.
Yeah, it is.
I like that. I like that.
If I can swear a little bit, we always used to say that secret word for Master Mason's actually hell no. But
absolutely
ignore that part too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true, right? I mean, in order to have become a Mason in the first place, we had to have said yes. Maybe that was the first mistake.
Good point. That's true. So we're already sucked in. Don't even know it.
That's right. That's right. So yeah. And I like that.
It is so easy to get so involved in masonry that you're just completely overwhelmed by it. Because like any other volunteer organization, as soon as you show up, someone's going to ask you to do something, or can you take this project on? Can you fill this position or that or this? And it's easy to keep saying yes. So eventually you do have to say no, but I would say yes more than saying no. Maybe that's the real advice.
I agree with you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because that's exactly what this fraternity needs is not just yes men, but, men who can say yes.
And step up.
And step up.
Right.
Right. So I like that. Yeah. Besides, if we didn't, imagine if George Washington didn't say yes.
Good
right?
point. Yeah. Well, where would we be without that?
Oh, yeah. Well, he said no plenty of times too, but,
he said right. He said yes to the right questions.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, all those brothers who, stood up and made something good happen, they finally said yes,
Right.
That's a very interesting, wow. I'm going to have to really think about that.
Now we both have something to contemplate on.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Now there's another education paper.
Exactly.
So no, that's great. Earlier we were talking about your time as master during the 250th anniversary of Lafayette's
200th.
200th. Okay.
He visited the lodge in 1824, and last year was his 200th.
Wow.
Or 2024 was his 200th anniversary.
There we go. And I think this year, is the 250th anniversary.
50th. Yeah. Of America.
Of America. That's right. Yeah. So, and just how much of an interesting role that we've played, how instrumental we were. I was just there at the Fredericksburg Area Museum probably about 6 weeks ago, and I guess there was a gunnery here in Fredericksburg.
Yep.
I think that was ran by Fielding Lewis.
Fielding Lewis, right.
Mm-hmm. And I actually got to see a rifle that said Fred 1776, and it was right there on the engraving plate, and I went, no way, man. I didn't realize just how much we've done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as a shameless plug for the Grand Lodge of Virginia, we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of America. So, stay tuned for that. So,
and certainly encourage everyone to take notice. Old school masonry never really talked about being Masons, being what we believed, or it just didn't talk to the outside world. But now we're really putting a brighter light on what was already there, and realizing, masonry in America does go hand in hand. It really is impressive.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I think the old school, right? Those guys out in the 1770s and stuff like that, I think they actually were doing a lot of what we're doing now. And then somewhere in the mix, I think they went really quiet, and shied away from all that. So to see that we're coming back to, I guess, the more OG form of it, I think that's really great to see.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, right? Because you see these quiet whisperings of all that stuff in media, in literature, in culture that had to have come from us, right? I was watching the Green Lantern, the other week, right? And I sat there thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, you've got the ring, you've got this particular symbol on that ring, and it's like, well, what are they all about? They're this core of people who focus on, bringing the light of their will into the world and, making the world a better place, protecting people, being without fear. And I sit there and I go, why is that so familiar? So I think it was hidden in a way that you could see the influence of it. And, you know, if you were in the know, you could sit there and go, okay, I see where we're going with this. But those who weren't, you know, I think they were subtle in their own ways, and I think we're subtle in our own ways. And I think we're getting back to that original experience of, you know, going out there, being out there in the public, all kinds of wonderful things like that. So as an interesting little story, so I was initiated September 18th, 2013. And I want to say that was the 200 and something. It was like the 200 somethingth anniversary of the Capitol cornerstone laying ceremony.
All right.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, to see all of this history kind of repeat itself, well, I say repeat itself, but, you know, well, I laid my cornerstone that day too, right? You know, so, you know, here we are. So, well, before we sign off, is there anything that you would like to, add, to say to our viewers? Anything that you'd like to say? The mic is entirely yours.
I guess one thing I would like to say, particularly to my brother, is just thank you. I am truly grateful for the fellowship, the guidance, the wisdom, the support, and it really has, all that has made me a better person. And I encourage listeners to find out what masonry is. We like to say, ask one to be one, but you don't necessarily have to be one, but learn more about it. I think that will be the bait, and maybe we can hook you from there. but certainly, masonry has a lot of history, particularly here in Fredericksburg, and I think the brothers are always willing to share their experiences. It's not a cliche to say we have a lot of wisdom here, because 300 plus brothers of all different ages, all different backgrounds. We're in all different faiths. We have a lot of different faiths here. And it really is a place that is locally focused, but has a global feel to it. To learn more about it, that's what I encourage people to do. Learn more about it. I can't remember, growing up in Fredericksburg, like, I had no idea how many times I walked by this building and didn't realize what it was or what it meant or who it represented. But so, take a look. Lodge is always open sometimes or another, and come just check it out. See the history here, then maybe ask more about it.
There we go. I like it. All right, brother. We're going to sign off now.
Thank you, Brother Justin. This has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you.
Likewise. Thank you, Brother Pat. All right.